Yo, what is up everyone? Back here with another video. Today's video, we're going to be going over how Sylveon won the Pokemon World Championships. I thought this was a super cool match. A lot of people actually were really hyped over the senior finals. Senior finals actually had a lot of attention on it this year. And yeah, the team that was utilized had a Sylveon on it in finals, which is super sick. So I wanted to go through this match because I thought it'd be cool to kind of review and just go over, right? So
look at Tomoya's accomplishments.
let's actually lower this while they're going through it.
Was able to secure top 6 at the Japan Nationals this year to be able to secure his
Just also see if I can speed the video up.
And when you take a look at how he's also performed in these online circuits, it's a global challenge top 4.
But yeah, like I think in general, what makes like senior finals really cool is the seniors have a completely different metagame than ours. Like I say completely different. It's not like as different like to the extent where like it's not the same at all. It's just that like they have some like more creative picks there sometimes because it's a smaller pool, and like also like I feel like when you get to Masters, everything's about hard optimizing stuff, right? Whereas, you know, when you play in the younger divisions, like sometimes it's comfort picks, sometimes it's, you know, stuff that you think is really good in senior metas. You're also kind of rewarded for counter teaming other seniors a bit more because it's a smaller pool, right? So
well, that is so impressive when you think about how many different players that you were able to play
against.
To get to the point where you're
Japan National top 6, Japan Championship main stage 48th. Global Challenge 2 top 4, Japan National Champion, or Japan National top 32. So he doesn't really have any crazy achievements up until this point, so it's kind of cool. Yeah, so now we get into the team. So I'm gonna, I guess I move myself over here for now. I'm gonna move myself back in a second. But basically, it's a Zapdos, Urshifu, Dark. It's a Sylveon, Gastrodon, Hisuian, Arcanine, Rillaboom. So you kind of see he has like the standard like Fire, Water, Grass core on the team. And he's utilizing a Zapdos, which is a really unique pick for this team, but I think Sylveon's really important, right? So, to my understanding, the Sylveon is specs on this team, which means it's going to be outputting a lot of immediate damage with Hyper Voice, right? And then also he has pressure with like the Urshifu Dark being able to set up Swords Dance, because I believe it is Terra Poison, Black Glasses SD, or Sash, like one of the two. But regardless, it's a really strong like you know, Mon choice on this team. So there's a lot of cool options here. I think the Hisuian Arcanine is also really cool because you can go for Rock Slide and Hyper Voice, which can pin a lot of swaps. It's really hard to switch into, right? So I just think there are a lot of like good options here.
It's going to be Zapdos, Dark Urshifu, Sylveon, Gastrodon, Hisuian, Arcanine, and Rillaboom. He said it himself, it's kind of a weird team, and a lot of these Pokemon have unique sets. For example, this Rillaboom is Ghost Terra Leftovers. It does not have
Ghost Terra Leftovers, huh? By the way, so I'm watching this for the first time, basically. So I watched the end of Game 2, I think, live, but I never actually got to watch the full set because I was in the Pokemon Center at the time because they were, like, closing it. I hadn't gotten to go yet. So, yeah.
Woodhammer. It's got Drum Beating, U-Turn, Fake Out, and Protect. Sylveon is a choice spec set.
Wait, Drum Beating, Fake Out, U-Turn, Protect. Well, yeah, that's a really interesting set. He's Terra Ghost with Lefty. So, like, he's very much committing to, like, the bulky and, like, kind of stally aspect of the team with, like, some of his slots. Terra Ghost is really interesting. I'm assuming the logic behind that is, like, Terra Ghost is, like, it helps you into Chien-Pao D-Knight a little bit. Because you can obviously just, like, Terra Ghost around it, right? You don't see those two super often, but, like, obviously it's still important to have some counterplay. Also, too, I could see, like, helping with Urshifu close combats, like Urshifu Rapid Strike close combats, like you hard wall it with Gastro and Rillaboom, so that's kind of cool.
Hyper Beam, Terra Blast, Hyper Voice, and Sleep Talk.
Hyper Beam, Terra Voice, or Terra Blast, Hyper Voice, Sleep Talk. So it's full on attack Sylveon, okay? So no coverage.
Assault Vest, Fairy Terra, Terra Blast as well.
Assault Vest, Terra Fairy, Terra Blast. That's for Dark Ursh. That makes sense.
Something that I think is fairly interesting. Gastrodon here is a Rocky Helmet set with Earth Power, Ice Beam, Yawn, and Protect.
Rocky Helmet, Earth Power, Ice Beam, Yawn, Protect. Yeah, so the Rocky Helmet's really nice because then if a close combat's like thrown in the Gastro, you get to chip them, right? And you get to break sashes. Then also it's really cool too if you're like absorbing some hits from like Iron Hands or those kind of Pokemon. So that's kind of neat too.
Is bulky. It's got that Citrus Berry. It's got that Roost and Tailwind combination as well. And
Citrus Zap. Okay.
Dark Urshifu with that Black Glasses.
Tailwind Roost is cool.
Very interesting tech to be able to have on this team, just to be able to boost up all of those dark type attacks. But how is it going to fare against his opponent?
All right, so let's take a look at his achievements. So he has moving again. Sorry, I'm gonna be moving a couple times while we're watching this. Hopefully you guys enjoy like this. I think it's cool to include the beginning because I think it's like really interesting to obviously go through, you know, their achievements too as the players. You know, obviously there's always a player behind, you know, the games that you're watching, so it's cool to kind of look at it. So an ASC top 8, UIC top 8, Utrecht Special Event finalist. Okay, so a bit more like higher placing achievements, but if I learned anything from like watching enough like like Pokemon matches and everything. Never underestimate
For the
Japan.
international championships this year, as well as also a back-to-back top 8 when you look at how he did at the European international championships too.
This is actually Robbie's first full season of playing competitively, so for
First
him to
season,
make
too.
it to the World
It's pretty good.
Championship Finals is so impressive, especially after losing in the top 8 of those last 2 internationals. Now he has the chance to claim his very first major title,
Interesting.
and he's got a really strong team to support that. We already started talking about it a little bit earlier. My eyes are definitely drawn to that Assault Vest
Okay.
Heatran. Now this Heatran has the Heavy Slam, which we mentioned. Heavy
Assault
Slam
Vest
is
Heatran with Heavy
interesting here, especially
Slam.
with Fairy Terras on the opposing side as well, and it just does large amounts of damage to something like Sylveon.
Yeah, so Aaron kind of talks about this here. Like, Heavy Slam Heatran's really interesting, and also being able to hit the Terra Fairies on the opposing side is nice. I don't think it'll really matter for Arcanine, honestly. I think it only really matters for Sylveon, for the most part. But I guess, I didn't hear if the Gastro was Terra Fairy, but, like, yeah, it will definitely, like, matter, right? Also, too, I think that, like, a really interesting thing here is, like, you can kind of exploit the Tornadus, like, offense into this team, like the Zapdos team, for the most part, because you can kind of get the speed advantage. I think Heatran is probably your most important tool in the matchup.
Grass Terra Heatran is one of the safest
Grass
combos
Terra
in terms of
Heatran,
Terra
okay.
in this format, and Robbie just has a lot of offense. You've got the Tornadus to set up the Sunny Day, you've got the Choice Specs Flutter Mane, you've got Heatran.
Sunny Day, Torn, Specs Flutter, okay.
The Landorus Therian here, pretty interesting, by the way. It actually has a Citrus Berry on it.
Citrus,
That
okay.
is very interesting indeed. When you look at how
Yeah, that's good
Landorus
context to
usually
have.
been
So,
used for some of these, you know,
pretty much we have all the info now, so the main thing that really comes into play here, right, is you know, obviously however they're going to utilize said tools. I think the Arcanine and the Sylveon from Tomoya's side is probably like what you want to go with, and if I were playing from Robbie's side, I'd probably want to be considering bringing the Heatran for sure. I think the Tornadus is definitely an option. I think you want Flutter for sure, because Flutter can just pressure so many of those Pokemon, including the Dark Urshifu.
on
So
more recent formats, take
Let's
a look
see.
at maybe something like a Choice Scarf or an Assault Vest, really be able to help out that Landorus do its job
Just skip a
more
little ahead.
effectively. But the Citrus Berry does give it a little bit of wiggle room when it comes down to how much damage with the Flutter Mane.
And of course, get hit by Ice Beam from Gastron.
Wow, that's a
Something I think
long,
would be really fun
long
is
wait.
Gastron versus Heatran, right? Because you're like, okay, when Moon gets early on, bait out those Terras, put things to sleep, and then sweep with Flutter and Heatran. But here we go, game
There we
1
go.
of the Senior Division World Championships. And
Okay, so you did go with Torn Flutter.
And there's Arcanine and Sylveon.
Okay, yeah. So I was gonna say, even though I said Torn and Flutter are good here, I don't know if you want to lead it. I think leading Heatran is better. If if you're Tomoya, you're probably already popping off because you basically won game 1 off of lead. And the reason why I say that is I don't think Robbie has any answers for Hyper Voice Rock Slide. Like, this is probably like in one turn, if you don't get the perfect switch here, like, you're probably getting pinned by Rock Slide and Hyper Voice, and you're insta losing the game. So I don't think this was the best for Robbie. I think if he had led Heatran, it might have been a bit better, right? But this is probably going to be a pretty devastating turn 1. I think if you were thinking about this matchup, you probably want to lead, like, Heatran plus, like, Lando, maybe, and then have the Torn Flutter in the back. It's kind of weird because Dark Ursh lead would pressure you a lot, but yeah, I don't think this was what you want to be leading.
Oh my gosh! We've got both of the fairy types on the field to be able to kick off this first game, and the Hisuian Arcanine is going to put a ton.
Voice, but there's that Heatran. That's a
Okay, Heatran comes in, which makes sense.
Fantastic to be able to.
Tailwind goes out. Yeah, you have to, at this point, if you're accepting Torn is going to go down, you just kind of get the Tailwind up, and then you're basically counting on winning with your backline here, which isn't the worst strategy. I mean, considering it's such a bad lead, I feel like you might have to do that.
It's going to be a
So
great defensive Pokemon to try to take some of these hits, but it's going to be the Rock Slide, and that's going to deal super effective damage.
Oh,
onto the
goodbye.
Tornadus, and the Hyper Voice to follow it up does take out the Torn.
You know, honestly, though, Heatran didn't really take that much, so it could be worse, but, like,
Robbie
yeah,
now
still not
has
super
a unique
ideal.
opportunity to be able to bring in something else right under that Tailwind.
I feel like it's going to be the Flutter, maybe.
Does not have close combat, which is sometimes
Or Lando too, yeah. Because if you have Lando, then Lando's legit. Yeah, so he brought the exact 4 mons, actually, I thought he should bring. So I guess that feels good. I got it right. In this case, right, like, I still think you're feeling pretty okay if you're Tomoya. Like, you haven't even revealed your back hit. You have some pivots. Gastro can definitely come in for one of your slots, and then probably the Zapdos or whichever other mon you have in the back. I think it's probably Zapdos in the back. Heat Wave is probably the move of choice coming out here from Robbie. If you're calling that they're going to switch out the Sylveon, then maybe you go for an Earth Power and Arc, or if you think they're switching out Arc, you go for Heat Wave, right? I would probably say Heat Wave Rock Slide here is the most likely play because it just covers all of his safe options here. Now, there's 2 ways that you could, like, hard counter this play if you're Tomoya. You could either just make, like, the hard read that he's not actually going to, like, go for the stomping and just click Rock Slide Hyper Voice immediately, or you can switch to Gastro here and just click Hyper Voice again, or you can double switch.
Go go for an Intimidate, not valuable into the Sylveon, but of course quite good into the Hisuian Arcanine and Tailwind to set up. The Sylveon here, of course, is locked into that Choice Specs Hyper Voice, right? So
yeah, he has to use Hyper Voice.
You could, of course, get around the super effective hit from the Heavy Slam with the Fire Terra, but one play you could make on the opposing side is just go for Stomping.
This battle scene and everything looks so cool, by the way. I played with it because obviously I made Top Cut of Worlds, so it was nice. Probably Gastro.
So Arcanine,
Yeah, it's Gastro, yep, because you take the Heat Wave, you take the Rock Slide, and then you go for Hyper Voice. Oh, okay, or you switch. Zapdos? Yep, Zapdos, there you go, yeah. So you went with, like, the pretty safe play, as I mentioned. Like, you could just double switch here, and it's pretty safe. So the reason why you switched in Gastro for Arc is because it's probably Earth Power going into Arc, and then it's also Heat Wave. I guess in that case, maybe you switch in Zapdos for the left slot, though, right? Is there a reason why you wouldn't want to switch it in? I guess, I don't know. Like, in the end, it's a micro decision, but, like, it kind of matters, right? Like, any chip really makes a difference here. I think Gastro and Zapdos being swapped in places would be slightly more optimal, but, like, yeah, no. I mean, it's still reasonable here.
The question now is, what is going into that slot? It's going to be Stomping Tantrum.
Oh, okay, so he hard read the Stomping. So, in fact, actually, he did make a better play than I would have made, because he was calling the Stomping to go into Sylveon. So in this case, I guess what he was doing is he was hard calling that, like, Stomping was going to go into the Sylveon, and then maybe a double up. Heavy Slam? Oh, okay, that makes more sense. Okay, so I mean, technically Gastro would have taken Heavy Slam just as well. He actually would have gotten chip on both of them with Rocky Helmet. And the Lando wouldn't have gotten a double boost on its Stomping, but this isn't, like, the worst, right? If Static goes off here and affects the Heatran, I'm pausing before this turn because it's very crucial. If Static goes off, that's really bad for Robbie. That's probably, like, almost, like, near guaranteed game lose. I wouldn't say near guaranteed game losing, but, like, it's not great, right? And then you have, you know, obviously the Stomping do nothing, but I don't know if you mind that too much if you're Robbie. I probably would have preferred to see a Rock Slide from his end, but, like, I think a Stomping then going into the Heatran would be the worst. Or not in Heatran, in Gastro. So, yeah, Static goes off. Yeah, that's not good. It's pretty brutal. So I think going into this turn, Robbie's really behind. He kind of has to make a call here. You could make some pretty, like, risky plays here if you really felt like you needed to catch up. I think Arcanine will come back in here somewhere, probably for Zapdos. So you could do, like, one of two things, right? Like, if you think that Tomoya is going to play safe, which theoretically he should because it's, like, he's in the lead, right? You probably just want to click, like, Rock Slide, and then, yeah, I guess you're going to want to Terra Grass, Terra Blast, but that's so obvious. I feel like maybe you want to click, like, Heat Wave instead. And just call the Gastro is not going to, like, you know, go for the Earth Power, because it's pretty obvious. The second play you can make, which is a bit riskier, is throw Stomping in the Zapdos, calling Zapdos to switch back into Arcanine. That would, even though it's pretty risky, it could net you a serious advantage if you get the turn proper, because there is a chance Gastro just protects here, and, like, he wants to get an Intimidate off. I probably would just Stomping. If I'm behind like this, I'm probably Stomping in the Zapdos, and if I get it wrong, I just accept I'm going to Game 3. Or Game 2.
You, of course, have to worry about the Landers now going for Stomping Tantrum onto the Gastron slot. This Heatran, of course, is that Grass Terra as well. So you Grass Terra, Terra Blast here. One play I think you could make is honestly just protect Gastrodon right now and set up a Tailwind with Zapdos, maybe even just Thunderbolt into the Heatran. Right now, you have an early lead on Tomoya's end, right? So it's like trying to bait out a Terra, see what Robbie's
Let's see, Lando switches.
An amazing first two turns.
Flutter comes out. I mean, that makes sense too. You can do that. Okay, so and this is the risk of, like, just clicking something like that, right? Like, you just like, I would have just lost the game on the spot, right? So you know, like, so is life, I guess. I can admit, you know, it's a very risky play. You kind of accept that you're about to lose, although I do think Robbie's behind anyway, so he had to make, like, a crazy play. That being said, Rock Slide probably would have been fine here too, but I don't mind the Flutter Switch. The Flutter Switch is kind of like that neutral middle ground. That's really funny. Yeah, I would have just instantly lost in Worlds Finals casually. But yeah, all right, game 1. But yeah, I think bringing in Flutter makes sense here, especially too, because, like, Thunderbolt isn't likely going into the Lando anyways, right? And then also, like, if Icy Wind comes out, it can take it very comfortably. You're pressuring both of these with the Fairy move, so it's not terrible. Oh yeah, Heat Wave missing Zapdos is, like, that's very bad. Oh, Yawn too? Yeah, that's pretty rough.
I really like the Yawn, honestly, because Fluttermane right now feels like it exerts a lot of offensive pressure, right? But if you decide to actually attack this turn, you're going to fall asleep, and Gastron could so easily protect right now. So Tomoya here could make it a prediction, right, and say, okay, well, I think you're just go back into Landorus. You haven't Terra'd, I can just Ice Beam into that slot. So this is really critical, right?
Yeah, I would probably just Ice Beam into Flutter as well. I think what Aaron's saying is, like, actually really reasonable here. I think, like, just Ice Beaming into Flutter here, and then going for a Thunderbolt into Heatran maybe to start chipping away at it isn't bad.
immediately,
or well, I guess Heatran could Terra Grass, Terra Blast, so you could click Hurricane into it as well. I think if you're Robbie,
Yeah, absolutely, but I think
I don't even know. I feel like honestly, Robbie's just in such a bad position here. He's probably pretty pinned, but yeah, that's really interesting, I guess. Yeah, I feel like here it's like maybe your best play is like Heat Wave Dazzle, call them not to protect. Yeah, but even that doesn't win. Yeah, it's just pretty rough.
I would not mind taking that to.
I mean switch too. You could switch. You could switch Terra Grass, Terra Blast into Gastro. That's probably pretty reasonable.
And there is no switch on
Oh, is he gonna Terra?
Oh,
he's carrying Flutter. Ooh, I don't know how I feel about that.
Take a few of these hits just a little bit better.
Does Gastron protect? It does protect. Goes for the same play. And with Flutter Mane not switching out, it's going to fall asleep after this turn.
Oh, he made the read and hard targeted Gastro. Yeah, this is probably GG from this turn. So, like, he invested on the hard read that Gastro wasn't going to protect. If you can get rid of Gastro, it makes your Landorus' job a lot easier because Lando's pretty good in the Arcanine, and then Heatran can deal with the opposing, you know, Sylveon, and, like, potentially your Heatran has a win con there. But because he just invested this turn in, now the game is probably over. I think what Tomoya was expecting wasn't the Moonblast play, but I think he was covering for the Terra Grass, Terra Blast play, plus a Moonblast or a switch, right? So I think that, assuming that he's AV, I think he is AV, because the Heatran hasn't protected once, and I feel like it would have protected if it was, you know, a different item. But yeah, so this is pretty bad. I don't know if it's I don't know. I don't think it's a recoverable board state. I think the game's kind of over from here. Oh, and Hurricane 2 is, yeah, he was covering it with Hurricane as well.
Fluttermane's going to fall asleep right now. Tomoya is playing lights out in this very first game of the World Championship Finals. And Heatwave misses Zapdos too, just adding insult to
This is, to be fair, this is some brutal luck for Robbie. Like, he missed, like, Heatwave missed twice. Like, I mean, Zapdos as Citruso would survive, but, like, yeah, not connecting anything on that Zapdos is just, like, pretty brutal.
And now you said 2 turns got called completely right. It's gonna be a
I think if he had Moonblasted into Zapdos, that would have been better, honestly.
As it stands, Tomoya has hit up the Tailwind just a few turns later. Will get the speed control in his favor once Robbie's Tailwind expires, and this Flattermane is asleep.
Yeah, I think for Robbie right now, if you want to mount a comeback, you have to make basically the perfect switch each turn, right? You don't have Terra anymore, so the Heatran, of course, is left exposed to a potential Earth Power. It's going to be
Flutter switches. I think this is losing because you have to basically, like, burn your sleep turns, and you have to hope that Flutter doesn't go down, and you have to hope for, like, a 1-turn wake, because at this point, like, if your Flutter isn't, like, waking up and attacking, like, you're gonna lose anyways, right?
What's critical is now the Heatran just doesn't really threaten Gastron, so you don't really need to consider a Terra on that anymore.
But wait, after the Intimidate drop, what kind of attack did Tomoya go for?
Ooh, it's Thunderbolt.
Okay,
into the Landorus, okay.
Great switch there from Robbie to not
take that.
And
the Earth Power into the Heatran, super effective.
What?
Does not care about the assault as Heatran is now down.
Yeah, that's pretty much game over. Like, the switch wasn't even worth it, really, because, sure, like, you save yourself some damage, but it's just like, you're so behind at this point, I feel like you need to just pray for, like, a Flutter wake up to even just knock out Gastro or knock out Zapdos, something, right? Give yourself a chance. I also think, like, if Moonblast went in Zapdos the previous turn, it might have opened up more avenues to win, but yeah.
Can't protect. It has to take a turn of sleep. You can very easily double up onto that slot with the Thunderbolt and an Earth Power. Try to just get the knockout onto that.
At this point, you pray for Flutter wake up and you go for Rock Slides if you have Rock Slide. I actually, considering that the AV is on the Heatran, I guess there is a chance the Lando doesn't even have Rock Slide and it's Terra Blast.
So. Really beautiful play by him so far.
It has been amazing, and this Landorus won't be able to do too much to the Zapdos on the other side. It is not carrying anything like a Rock Slide. And so
okay, there you go. So that's a confirmation. So it's running Terra Blast, U-turn, and Stomping. So.
The first attack, and it's just a critical hit. Gastrodon doesn't even need to follow that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Robbie had some pretty brutal luck here, but I also think that, like, it was too far gone once that turn where he fell asleep happened.
Surprised to see the Earth Power here just to really play it safe, guarantee the knockout onto that slot. We saw a couple of Heatwave misses. There's the Earth Power. We saw a couple of Heatwave misses. The Flutter Mane perfectly, right? It's like if I have lead arc.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go to next game.
Robbie makes here.
Okay.
The lead looks so good as well. So much offensive pressure coming in from the Tornadoes.
Yeah, that's so interesting, but
at the very beginning of.
Yeah, I just feel like it's funny how, by the way, they added like all this setup phase here. But it's like you could have cut all this out and it would have been like a 15-minute finals.
That game
or something.
Tomoya called it. You could see that in the leads that he ended up bringing with the Arcanine.
They got the replay function? Okay.
Hyper Voice doesn't really... about Amoonguss here is that it's the Dark Terra Amoonguss. So if you go for Dark Terra, well then you're suddenly weak to Hyper Voice.
Yeah, you can't Dark Terror here. I don't even think Amoonguss is like super great. Now that you know what Tomoya is leading though, you could lead Lando and Heatran as I mentioned, but you gotta be careful with Dark Ursh.
So not sure that's the best answer into the Arcanine Sylveon lead specifically. There is also the Water Urshifu, which is quite good and can put on a lot of offensive pressure, but do you really feel comfortable bringing that into a matchup with Gastrodon? I personally wouldn't.
No, I think that's why we ended up seeing both of the Urshifu stay at home in that game number 1. Non-factor. Maybe that changes heading into game number 2. But do we see that Heatran adjustment coming out from Robbie right away? Let's go ahead and find out as we jump into game 2 of the Seniors Division World Championship Finals. And there's the Heatran and the Landers from Robbie. And we'll see the Gastrodon and the Sylveon.
Tomoya says, I'm not going to go with the same thing again. There's no way you go with Tornadus plus Fluttermane. If Torn and Fluttermane had actually been led here, it would actually be...
Okay, so they have a Heatran and a Lando lead, which is what I mentioned. But this time, it's Gastro and Sylveon in the lead. So what Tomoya did here was pretty smart because essentially what you're saying is, okay, I know you want to adjust your lead. I know you're going to be prepared for Arcanine. So I'm not going to lead the Arcanine, right? Because then obviously you just pin it. Even if Flutter and Torn was led, right? Like this is still like reasonable for you to deal with because you still have Sylveon on the field. You could switch in your Hizui and Arcanine to take the Moonblast, right? So you have some options there. But this is like pretty neutral, I think, for both players as compared to like game 1 of turn 1, or game 1 turn 1, right? Being so in Tomoya's favor. This is a bit more of a neutral board state. I think in general, Robbie's best options here are probably going to be going for something like a Terragrass Terrablast if you assume Gastro's going to attack. If you think Gastro isn't going to attack here, you click Heat Wave and you click Stomping in the Sylveon, or you click U-Turn off of it and bring in something like that's better. But I don't think he has any switches for Hyper Voice, so I feel like you might just have to click Stomping here and cut your losses on the Lando.
Expects the adjustment, brings that Sylveon with the Gastrodon this time around, and Gastrodon's so well positioned into a Landorus plus Heatran. You can Ice Beam the Landorus slot, you can Earth Power Heatran. However, you still have to dance this awkward battle.
But yeah, this is cool because he does force Grass Terror out of Heatran if they're like worried about the Earth Power, right? So theoretically, what you could do is just Earth Power and Hyper Voice into Heatran, right? And if they Terra Grass, they're taking a ton from Hyper Voice. If they don't, then they're taking a bunch. But Heavy Slam is always a threat here, so there's a chance Zapdos just comes in here to take both hits for Sylveon. And then Earth Power comes out on the Heatran or something along those lines.
I think from Tomoya's side right now, you really want to bait out a Terra and see if the Heatran...
This turn definitely has a lot of variance.
Who do you Terra, right? Do you Terra the Gastrodon defensively? Do you Terra Sylveon? The thing is, if you Terra either of these Pokemon, they suddenly become weak to other attacks that Landorus and Heatran carry.
Exactly. So maybe we do end up seeing some sort of pivot, or you just lean into the Terra right away. Either choice.
Okay, no Terra.
Switches,
We're just
no
going for damage.
That's
okay,
a
damage.
the Gastrodon, and the Landorus
Targets Gastro.
But Heat Wave misses.
Okay, so Heat Wave misses Gastro, but he gets a crit on Sylveon in return. Honestly, like if I were in Robbie's position, I'd be okay with that because getting the crit damage on the Sylveon's actually a little bit more vital here because Sylveon's such a thorn for like the you know, your side, especially too if you are taking something like Urshifu in the back or you're taking something like another one of the mons.
So. Gonna take a huge chunk though from that critical hit, but a Hyper Voice in return.
Oh my god, that Hyper Voice does so much to Landorus. This Pokemon's so broken.
Gonna get taken down so low, but there is that
Citrus Berry at least, but geez, that was so much damage.
And let's see, Gastrodon going for the Earth Power into the Heatran. No, Terra does not keep
Okay, so Heatran with AV takes this, obviously. You guys can see a health bar. I'm gonna hide myself for a second. It's like 49 HP. That being said, like, I still think it's pretty reasonable, like, to what he did here, right? You just want to damage. Like, you're trading damage on your first 2 mons, so your last 2, which is probably Flutter, is going to do the work to win. I would preserve Landorus here, because Landorus is pretty crucial for you dealing with the opposing, Arcanine, though. I think here, right, if you're in Robbie's shoes, you probably click something like Heat Wave. Maybe Heavy Slam if you want to try and dispatch the Sylveon this turn. Sylveon could do something like Terra, though. I think even a U-turn and a Heavy Slam into the Sylveon slot might not be terrible. You obviously are letting Gastro get some free reign here. But if you do that in the Sylveon here, right, like, then you get a free, you do get a free, like, switch into your Flutter and probably a knockout. And if something else comes in, then you could just Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam. Tomoya here is probably just going to click something like Hyper Voice and attack, or switch to Zapdos and attack.
Very interesting to see no Terra on either end, right? Both players actually just kind of trade damage. Gastron's still looking fairly healthy. So now the question is, do you really feel comfortable tearing Landorus or Heatran? They're both such low health at this point. Sylveon still in an awkward spot. So it's like, do you want to consider switching that into Zapdos, protecting Gastron, for example? Curious if Zapdos is even in the back, but it does feel like a really consistent bring to cover for that Landorus.
Zapdos might also be the perfect response.
Heatran comes back, okay.
Power to come out, but it is going going to be the Flutter main switching.
Flutter comes out. Ooh, if Hyper Voice coming out here, this is going to be a little ugly.
That Heat Tran for later, but the stopping tantrum is just going to go into the Sylveon. The survivalist here.
Yeah, so to be honest with you, like, I think this is why you U-turn and click Heavy Slam here. I think Robbie is getting punished really hard in this finals because he's playing so passive versus Sylveon. Like, this Pokemon here, you see this screaming Pokemon here? This is one of the most broken Pokemon in existence with specs. So, like, if you let it get an attack off, you're going to end up like these guys over here. You know what I'm saying? You're going to end up getting cooked. So, I think this is now probably pretty devastating for Robbie to the point where, like, the game is, like, more so going to be over. I think, like, or over, at least, like, it's pretty bad, right? I think here, like, this had to be an attack on Sylveon, always, like, no matter what. And I think, like, him just sitting there and, or him, like, just stomping here and counting on the KO was too risky.
Hyper Voice in response, and Landorus is down for the count.
3 HP on this Sylveon. He gets so much damage. There's Earth Power on the Fluttermane. Oh, but Fluttermane
So
does survive.
close.
For what it's worth, too, I think Tomoya is, like, playing, like, pretty perfectly. Like, I think he's really capitalizing off of Robbie's mistakes. I definitely think Robbie could have made, like, a lot of better decisions in this game. And in the previous game, but I do think that, like, this also showcases, like, dude, I think Japanese players are, like, such leagues ahead of, like, a lot of other players in the world. And, like, this doesn't necessarily mean that, obviously, Robbie got to finals, so he's not, like, bad, you know? But, like, I've even watched, like, seniors and juniors that have just impressed me so much with their understanding of the game. And, yeah, I mean, Tomoya is just playing, like, insanely well here, right?
That Sylveon sure does love its trainers. It's going to be able to hold on. And as we do see the Amoonguss now, nice adjustment from Robbie to be able to slow down the pace of this game.
So I don't know how I feel about Amoonguss. So, like, Tailwind's not up, so Gastro probably outspeeds the Amoonguss. What you could do here, if you thought your Amoonguss was faster, is go for a Gleam, then go for a Side Puff, right, to try and, like, at least give yourself some healing back. Another niche play that you can make, theoretically, if you're just expecting Flutter to get targeted here, is you could switch in Heatran here and click, you know, Pollen Puff, but this is pretty rough, honestly. This is, like, very, very bad for Robbie. I think you click Gleam here, and you click Rage Powder, maybe, to redirect the Gastro, and so that way you can at least have the hope of getting an attack off, but if you're, like, at this point of the game, you're kind of accepting that, like, you're in a really bad position, and you need your opponent to make some, like, bad mistakes.
Hyper Voice puts in so much work. Fluttermane does critically survive that. I feel like if Fluttermane faints there, the game is just over immediately.
Yeah, what Aaron said, right? Like, if he went down, the game was done.
9 HP, right? Amoonguss, it could Terra, but then it's weak to Hyper Voice. I mean, Fluttermane right now can go for, like, Fairy Terra and just go for, like, a Dazzling Gleam, but looks like it's just going to
Protect Gastro, you go for Hyper Voice, you get a free switch, yep.
Yeah, that Amoonguss is actually critically right
Side
now.
Pollen Puff would be perfect here. This is a Side Pollen Puff, this is at least a game.
Leaf Storm. So a nice way to be able to protect itself as the Gastrodon does go for that. Sylveon is just going to go down in this turn, but it has put in so much work in this game number 2 that it deserves a little bit of
Yeah, so, like, the reason why you never go for a Spore there, I mean, I guess you, no. So, never go for a Spore there is, like, unfair. I think you can go for a Spore. What he was basically counting on was that he was going to get a Spore on the Gastro. Next turn, Arcanine comes in, it misses Rock Slide on the Heatran, and then you get a Side Puff, right? And that's how you can win the game, in theory. But in practice, that's a lot harder because, you know, you're obviously risking it. Also, like, you cover for both plays. Like, you have to make a read either way, right? So he covered for the Spore line. If he had Side Puffed here, that would have actually given him maybe a route to win the game because then Arcanine has to pick between Rock Slide or has to pick between Flare Blitzing into Amoonguss, and maybe you could switch in Heatran, you know, take the hit or go for Protect, something along those lines. But this just makes Tomoya's line really easy. If you have Arcanine, you bring in Arcanine here. Yep. And now you could just click Rock Slide here, which is pretty safe, and you could, well, I guess you could click Flare Blitz. So it's like, okay, I shouldn't over-exaggerate. It's not, like, over to the extent where, like, there's no thought involved left, but, like, this is really bad for Robbie still. Like, I think if you're in Tomoya's position, you guarantee yourself a KO and throw out a Rock Slide, like, for, you know, the KO. It's really important here. I think you yawn Amoonguss, so Amoonguss can't, like, you know, Spore you again if it chooses Spore this turn. If he protects Amoonguss here and, like, Tomoya Rock Slides, the game's done.
There, you have to Terra Blast for a little bit later if you want to be able to try to put that specific type of damage down, but it's going to be a Dazzling Gleam, so Gastrodon, Arcanine, just taking a little bit of chip here, so Arcanine is going to be able to Rock Slide.
Yep, if he flinches too, it's also over.
But is the Amoonguss going to...
But Yawn's going to come out here.
Ice Beam.
Oh, Ice Beam, okay. So, like, it's fine that he Ice Beamed. It's definitely slightly less optimal. Clicking Yawn here is always good because then you just kind of guarantee that, like, Amoonguss is going to go to sleep. But I mean, this also works out fine too, I guess.
Doesn't get the knockout. It is
Okay,
a crit.
critical
That's a
hit.
lot of damage.
Crit 2, that's
And
pretty
Amoonguss
unfortunate.
dies
And Spore
for
goes
the
into
Arcanine,
Arcanine.
going into
So.
sleep.
Oh my goodness, this is so tense. One thing to note though is that this Amoonguss does not have Pollen Puff, so unlike some traditional Amoongusses, you can't just consistently heal up, and so
Okay,
yeah,
Heat
there's
Train
Heat
comes
just going
out.
back into this battle, but the Pokemon are
This is pretty rough. Like, I mean, you can maybe... Oh, you know what you could do here to win, actually? So there is actually a way for Robbie to win here. It's Terra Grass your Heatran, go for an Earth Power into Arcanine and Side Puff.
such low HP right now.
But if he gets red and Ice Beam goes into Heatran, the game's over. Actually, Amoonguss will probably just die to Ice Beam anyways. So yeah, like, the game's probably over. Unless Hurricane misses a ton.
Something like the Terra Grass, Terra Blast to be able to pick up the Gastrodon. Arcanine is asleep, so there are a few turns.
I was trying to think of, like, ways out, but, you know, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, definitely. You're at least in a position
Actually,
where-
well, Gastro's low in health. It doesn't have recover. So, yeah, so what could happen here is, like, let's say that, like, Arcanine goes to... So, like, Arcanine sleeping this turn. Gastro, if it's slower than Amoonguss and a Puff goes off on Heatran, definitely winnable. If Gastro knocks out the opposing Amoonguss here and Heatran goes for a Earth Power and knocks out Arcanine, and then there's the Zapdos on the field, it does make the game harder. I guess you could also switch Arcanine and
You can put on
Zapdos
pressure onto both slots, for
as
example.
well.
The Heatran here can just go for Grass Terra.
But I think you just Rock Slide and try and wake
The
up.
question is now you're playing around when does the Arcanine manage to wake up? And there's the Grass
Yeah,
Terra.
you could also Terra Blast Side Puff isn't bad either. Actually, Terra Blast Side Puff is pretty good. But he might read that he's did he read the?
Gonna have to get through
Oh,
that as
it's
the
Heat
Heat
Wave.
Wave comes out now.
Oh,
Arcanine's
just
gonna
like, I don't
avoid
think that
that, but
KOs. Gastrodon
Gastrodon survives.
Okay, so to be honest with you, I think that this game was very winnable by Robbie and it was thrown away. So knowing that the Amoonguss is faster too completely changes it, and that had Leaf Storm as well. There were a lot of opportunities for him to remove the Gastro that he just didn't take. Obviously Gastro has a Terra available, but I think just throwing Leaf Storm into the Gastro earlier would have been good. Going for a Spore was fine the previous turn, but this turn you had the side Pollen Puff, like it was your only win con out of here. So I definitely think that like it's a misplay to go for a Leaf Storm here onto the Arcanine. Maybe he was calling Zapdos to come in, but even if you're calling Zapdos to come in, then you just re-spore the Arcanine and you Terra Blast, right? Like that would be fine, but yeah, I think and like also too, you have to remember pressure of Worlds Finals, like there are gonna be mistakes made, and it's obviously easier to identify all these things in retrospective. But this play basically is like nail in the coffin for Robbie. Like he basically gave himself no outs.
Leaf Storm into the Arcanine slide. That means Gastrodon gets an attack off. It should get a knockout here if it goes for Ice Beam. It's into the Amoonguss. That's down. It's a 3v1.
And that's game over. Like I mean, at this point, Tomoya just wins because Heatran didn't get any healing from the Amoonguss, right? Terra Blast didn't go into Gastro to knock it out. Like it was essentially as soon as Robbie clicked that Heat Wave button, like he forfeited the game essentially. So
see how Robbie can win this anymore.
it definitely should have been a Pollen Puff into Heatran and a Terra Blast, ideally. Even if not Terra Blast, you can Earth Power, right?
Heatran is gonna be the final Pokemon left for Robbie as a Gastrodon. The
Yeah, that's
Arcanine
pretty
are
brutal.
Still that fourth in the back. It's gonna be the Sylveon that did get like.
I mean, at this point, you just attack.
There, but the battle
But he
is
canceled,
canceled. And Tomoya Ogawa is
Yeah, I mean,
champion.
so this finals was really interesting. I feel like Tomoya played, so the way the finals was played, right? There were some big key turns that were like throughout. I think that turn where there was nothing done to like side Pollen Puff or anything was really crucial. I think Tomoya played well, and I think he made really good plays. I think Robbie did give him a lot of positions where he was able to do well, but I think Tomoya's team also just exerted so much pressure versus the Tailwind mode that like, you know, obviously Robbie was forced to bring something that was like less, you know, less like, I guess, common for his team. Like he was forced to not bring Torn. And that's kind of what like Tomoya's team does. And I think the Sylveon obviously just exerted a ton of pressure. It was able to clean up and do a bunch of damage early, which set up for the back sweepers to win and like let the Arcanine win, right? So I think overall it was a pretty well played set in general, especially from Tomoya's end. I think Robbie did make some key critical mistakes, which of course, again, it's his first season. So like you will make mistakes and like, you know, at least like you're making them in Worlds Finals and not at like the O3 tables. So it's like you're doing well. You know what I mean? Like you made it to finals, like obviously that's still a good placement. But yeah, I think like for sure, like it's a really interesting finals because it really showcases the strength of Sylveon and Hisuian Arcanine's ability to pin with Hyper Voice and Rock Slide. you know, while also just like showing like, yeah, I mean, Tomoya just played like great. I mean, he made very few mistakes. Any of the plays he made like had good justifications or were pretty reasonable in certain situations. So I definitely think that like it was cool to see. But yeah, anyways, great set. You know, it was really fun watching this one and going over it. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. And question of the day is, what do you think are some other underlooked like or overlooked Pokemon that are like pretty strong? Like for example, like Sylveon, that could be like really good to make deep runs at tournaments. Anyways, guys, thank you for the support on the videos. Catch you next one. Peace.